I watched the security camera footage for the third time that morning, my coffee growing cold in my hand, and I still could not believe what I was seeing. There she was, Karen Fieldstone, president of the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association in Phoenix, Arizona, walking straight onto my property at 7 in the morning, disconnecting my backup generator from its concrete pad, and wheeling it away on a dolly like she owned the place. The audacity was stunning, but what she did not know was that I had installed a GPS tracker inside that generator 6 months ago, after someone tried to steal my lawn equipment from the backyard. My name is Vincent Hallbrook, and I had lived in this pristine suburban neighborhood for almost 4 years. I worked from home as a software consultant, which meant reliable power was not just a convenience but a necessity for my livelihood. Arizona summers were brutal, and power outages were common enough that investing in a quality backup generator made perfect sense. I had spent nearly $8,000 on that Honda EU 7000 IS generator, one of the quietest and most reliable models on the market. I had gone through all the proper channels, submitted the installation plans to the HOA, received written approval, and even hired a licensed contractor to install it on a pad behind my house where it was barely visible from the street. Karen had been a thorn in my side since the day I moved in. She was one of those people who seemed to have nothing better to do than patrol the neighborhood looking for violations, real or imagined. She had cited me for leaving my trash cans out 15 minutes past the designated time, for having a welcome mat that was supposedly the wrong shade of brown, and for parking my truck in my own driveway at an angle she deemed unacceptable. Every violation came with a fine, and every fine came with a smug letter printed on HOA letterhead with her signature at the bottom. But this was different. This was not a citation or a fine. This was outright theft. I grabbed my phone and opened the GPS tracking app. The little blue dot representing my generator was moving east on Thunderbird Road, about 2 miles from my house. My heart pounded as I watched it in real time. I took screenshots, saved the video footage from my security camera to my laptop, and then called the Phoenix Police Department non-emergency line. The dispatcher who answered sounded tired. "Phoenix Police, what is your location and the nature of your call?" "Hi, my name is Vincent Hallbrook, and I need to report a theft. My HOA president just stole my backup generator from my property, and I have video evidence and GPS tracking showing where it is right now." There was a pause. "You have GPS tracking on your generator?" "Yes, madam." "I installed a tracker after some attempted thefts in my neighborhood last year. I can see exactly where it is, and I have security camera footage of the HOA president taking it from my property this morning." "What is your address, sir?" I gave her my address on Saguaro Drive and explained the situation in more detail. She told me an officer would be dispatched within the hour and that I should not attempt to retrieve the generator myself. I agreed, though every fiber of my being wanted to jump in my truck and chase down that blue dot on my screen. While I waited, I called my neighbor, Marcus, who lived 3 houses down. Marcus was a retired Phoenix fire captain, a straightforward guy who had his own issues with Karen over the years. He answered on the second ring. "Vincent, what is going on?" "Marcus, you are not going to believe this. Karen just stole my generator." "What? Are you serious?" "Dead serious. I have it on video. She came onto my property at 7 this morning, disconnected it, and wheeled it away. I have GPS tracking on it, and I just called the cops." Marcus let out a low whistle. "Man, I knew she was power hungry, but this is a whole new level. You need anything?" "Just wanted to give you a heads up. This is probably going to get ugly. Keep me posted. I will back you up if you need a witness or anything." The officer arrived 45 minutes later. He was a younger guy, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and sharp eyes. His nameplate read Officer Ramirez. I invited him in and showed him straight to my home office where I had everything pulled up on my computer. "This is the security footage from this morning," I said, playing the video. The timestamp showed 7:03 a.m. Karen appeared from the side of my house, looked around briefly, then walked purposefully to the generator. She unplugged it from the house connection, disconnected the ground wire, and then produced a dolly from somewhere off camera. With surprising efficiency, she tilted the generator onto the dolly and wheeled it away toward the street where her white Lexus SUV was parked. Officer Ramirez watched intently. "And you said you have GPS tracking on this generator?" "Yes, sir." I pulled up the tracking app on my phone. "It is currently at this location." The blue dot sat stationary at an address on Bell Road about 5 miles away. "It has been there for about 30 minutes. He wrote down the address. "And you have documentation that this generator belongs to you?" I handed him a folder I had prepared. Inside was the receipt from Home Depot showing my purchase, the installation permit, the approved HOA application with Karen's own signature on it approving the installation, proof of insurance, and the serial number documentation. Everything is here. The serial number is visible in the security footage too, if you look closely. Officer Ramirez nodded, clearly impressed with my preparation. "This is very thorough, Mr. Holbrook. You said the person who took it is your HOA president, Karen Fieldstone. She lives 4 streets over on Desert Willow Lane. She has been the HOA president for 6 years. I have copies of all the violations she has sent me if you need those too, just to establish the pattern of harassment. Let me make some calls." He stepped outside to his patrol car. I watched through the window as he spoke into his radio, gesturing occasionally. After about 10 minutes, he came back inside. "We are going to head to the address where the GPS shows your generator. I am going to need you to come with me to identify the property." "Can you do that?" "Absolutely." I locked up my house and climbed into the passenger seat of his patrol car. It felt surreal, sitting there among the computers and equipment, heading out to track down my own stolen property. As we drove, Officer Ramirez asked me more questions about my history with the HOA. "She has always been excessive," I explained, "but it was just fines and citations before. Annoying, sometimes questionable, but nothing criminal. This morning was the first time she has actually taken something that belongs to me." "Do you have any idea why she would take your generator specifically?" I had been thinking about that all morning. "About 3 weeks ago, there was an HOA meeting. She proposed a new rule that would ban all generators in the neighborhood, claiming they were eyesores and too noisy. I spoke up against it because mine is specifically designed to be quiet, and it is installed in compliance with all current rules. Several other homeowners agreed with me, and the proposal was voted down. She was furious." Officer Ramirez nodded. "So this might be retaliation." "That is what I am thinking." We pulled up to the address on Bell Road, which turned out to be a pawn shop called Desert Gold Exchange. My stomach dropped. She had not just stolen my generator, she had already sold it. Officer Ramirez parked and we both got out. The GPS signal was definitely coming from inside the building. We walked through the front door and a bell chimed overhead. The shop was cluttered with the usual pawn shop fare. Guitars, jewelry, power tools, electronics, all crammed into glass cases and metal shelves. A man in his 50s with a gray beard stood behind the counter. "Morning, officer," he said, his eyes immediately wary. "Something I can help you with." Officer Ramirez stepped forward. "Morning. We are investigating a theft. Do you have a Honda generator that was brought in this morning? The man's expression shifted to something between annoyance and resignation. Yeah, we do. Lady brought it in about an hour ago, said it was hers, had some story about upgrading to a newer model. Why? Because that generator was stolen from this gentleman's property. Officer Ramirez gestured to me. We have video evidence and GPS tracking that led us here. The pawn shop owner sighed heavily. Unbelievable. This is the third time this month someone has tried to sell me stolen property. Yeah, it is in the back. Hold on. He disappeared through a door behind the counter and returned a minute later, wheeling my generator. The sight of it filled me with both relief and anger. I checked the serial number immediately. It matched my documentation perfectly. This is definitely mine. Officer Ramirez examined it as well, comparing the serial number to the paperwork I had provided. Mr. Holbrook has all the documentation proving ownership. We are going to need to take this as evidence, and I am going to need any information you have on the person who sold it to you. The pawn shop owner was already pulling out paperwork. She had a driver's license. We make copies of everything for exactly this reason. Here. He handed over a photocopy of an Arizona driver's license. The photo showed Karen Fieldstone, and all her information was clearly visible. How much did you pay her for it? Officer Ramirez asked. $2,000. These Honda generators hold their value even used. My blood boiled. She had stolen an $8,000 generator and pawned it for a quarter of its value, probably just to spite me and make sure I could not get it back easily. Officer Ramirez took photos of all the documentation, including the pawn shop's records. We will need to keep the generator as evidence for now, but Mr. Holbrook should be able to reclaim it after the case is processed. I will write you up a receipt. The pawn shop owner looked miserable. So I am out $2,000. You will need to pursue that with Miss Fieldstone in civil court. The generator is stolen property. We loaded the generator into the trunk of the patrol car. It barely fit, but Officer Ramirez made it work. As we drove back toward my neighborhood, he got on his radio again, requesting backup to meet us at Karen Fieldstone's address. You are going to arrest her? I asked. She committed theft, sold stolen property, and we have everything we need to prove it. Yes, sir, we are going to arrest her. A second patrol car was already waiting when we arrived at Karen's house. A large Mediterranean-style home with an immaculate front yard and a 3-car garage. Officer Ramirez and the other officer, a woman named Officer Chen, approached the front door together. I stayed by the patrol car as instructed. Officer Ramirez knocked firmly on the door. After a moment, it opened, and there was Karen, dressed in yoga pants and a pristine white blouse, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She looked surprised to see the police, but she recovered quickly, putting on a concerned expression. Officers, is there a problem in the neighborhood? Karen Fieldstone, Officer Ramirez asked. Yes, that is me. I am the HOA president. If there is an issue, I am happy to help. Madam, we need to talk to you about a generator that was taken from 2847 Saguaro Drive this morning and sold to Desert Gold Exchange on Bell Road. The color drained from Karen's face. Just for a moment her mask slipped, and I saw pure panic. Then she tried to recover. I do not know what you are talking about. Madam, we have video surveillance showing you removing the generator from Mr. Holbrook's property at 7:03 this morning. We have GPS tracking that followed the generator to the pawn shop. And we have your driver's license information from the pawn shop records showing you sold the generator for $2,000 at 8:15 this morning. We recovered the generator, and Mr. Holbrook has provided all documentation proving ownership. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She looked past the officers and spotted me standing by the patrol car. Her expression hardened. That generator was installed in violation of HOA regulations. I had every right to remove it. Madam, even if there was a violation, which Mr. Holbrook's documentation shows there was not, the HOA does not have the right to seize and sell personal property. That is theft. I am the HOA president. I was acting in my official capacity. Officer Chen spoke up for the first time, her voice calm but firm. Your position in the HOA does not give you the authority to take and sell someone's personal property. You are going to need to come with us. This is ridiculous. I want to speak to my lawyer. You can do that from the station. Madam, please turn around and place your hands behind your back. Karen looked like she wanted to argue more, but something in Officer Chen's expression must have convinced her this was really happening. She turned around, and Officer Chen handcuffed her. The whole scene felt surreal. This woman who had spent years making my life difficult over the smallest perceived infractions was now being arrested for actual theft. You are under arrest for theft and trafficking in stolen property. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights? Yes, Karen said through clenched teeth. They walked her to the patrol car, and she refused to even look at me as they put her in the back seat. Officer Ramirez turned to me. We are going to need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement and sign some paperwork. Can you follow us down there? Yes, sir. Thank you for taking this seriously. Property theft is a serious crime, Mr. Holbrook, especially at this value level. In Arizona, theft of property valued over $4,000 is a Class 4 felony. She is looking at serious charges. I drove my truck to the police station, following the 2 patrol cars. My phone was buzzing constantly with texts and calls. Word was already spreading through the neighborhood. Apparently, several people had seen Karen being arrested and put in a police car, and the Meadowbrook Heights gossip network was in overdrive. At the station, I spent 2 hours giving my statement, going through all my documentation again, signing forms and answering questions. A detective named Martinez took over the case from the patrol officers. He was a heavy-set man with graying hair and the weary expression of someone who had seen too much human stupidity. Mr. Holbrook, I have been doing this job for 23 years, and I have seen HOA disputes that would make your head spin, Detective Martinez said as he reviewed my paperwork. But this is the first time I have seen an HOA president straight up steal something and pawn it. Usually they stick to illegal fines and power trips. This is bold. She has gotten away with a lot over the years, I said. Maybe she thought she was untouchable. Well, she is about to find out she is not. With the video evidence, GPS tracking, pawn shop records, and your documentation, this is one of the most open and shut cases I have seen. Her lawyer is going to have a hell of a time trying to defend this. I was finally able to leave the station around 3 in the afternoon. I was exhausted, hungry, and still running on adrenaline. When I got home, there were 3 cars parked in front of my house. Marcus was on my front porch along with 2 other neighbors, Janet and Robert, who lived on the opposite end of the street. Vincent. Janet called out as I climbed out of my truck. She was a retired teacher in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes. We heard what happened. Are you okay? I am fine. Just spent the last few hours at the police station. Is it true Karen stole your generator? Robert asked. He was a tall, thin man who worked as an accountant downtown. Yes, I have the whole thing on video. She took it this morning and pawned it. The police arrested her. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. I knew she was out of control, but this is insane. How stupid do you have to be to steal something that is on camera and then pawn it with your own ID? Arrogance, Janet said firmly. She has been running this HOA like a dictatorship for years, and nobody has stood up to her effectively. She probably thought she would get away with it. Well, she is not getting away with it this time, I said. The detective said it is a Class 4 felony. Robert's eyes widened. A felony? That is serious time. Serious time and a permanent record, Marcus added. Good. Maybe it will teach her she cannot just do whatever she wants. We talked for a while longer, and they caught me up on the neighborhood chaos that had erupted. Apparently, there was an emergency HOA meeting being called for the following evening. Several homeowners were demanding Karen's immediate resignation, while a few of her loyal supporters were claiming I must have somehow provoked her, or that there must be more to the story. That evening, I finally sat down and ate a proper meal. My phone continued to buzz with messages, including one from my sister in Denver, asking if the Facebook post she had seen about an HOA president being arrested in Phoenix was about my neighborhood. News traveled fast in the age of social media. I also received an email from an attorney named Patricia Gomez, who specialized in HOA law. She had somehow gotten wind of the situation and was offering her services if I decided to pursue a civil case against Karen or the HOA. I saved her contact information. I had a feeling I would need it. The next day, I received a call from Detective Martinez. Mr. Holbrook, I wanted to update you on the case. Karen Fieldstone was arraigned this morning. She posted bail and was released. The judge set a preliminary hearing for 3 weeks from now. We are charging her with 1 count of felony theft and 1 count of trafficking in stolen property. The county attorney's office is taking this seriously. What about my generator? When can I get it back? It will be held as evidence until after the preliminary hearing at minimum. I know that is frustrating, but we need it for the case. The good news is that with how solid this case is, I doubt it will take long to resolve. I understand. Thank you for keeping me informed. One more thing. I would expect Karen or her attorney to try to contact you. Do not engage with them directly. If they reach out, refer them to your attorney. If you do not have one, I strongly suggest you get one. I called Patricia Gomez that afternoon. She agreed to meet with me the following morning at her office in Scottsdale. When I arrived, I was impressed by how professional and organized everything was. Patricia was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with short, dark hair and an intensity that suggested she did not lose cases often. Mr. Holbrook, I have been following your case with great interest, she said as we sat down in her conference room. What Karen Fieldstone did was not just theft. It was an abuse of her position in the HOA, and it opens up significant liability for the HOA itself. I did not even think about going after the HOA, I admitted. You should. She was acting in what she claimed was her official capacity as HOA president. That means the HOA can be held liable for her actions. You have damages here. The cost of the generator, the loss of its use, your time dealing with this situation, emotional distress, and potentially punitive damages for the egregious nature of the theft. How much are we talking about? Patricia leaned back in her chair. Conservatively, you could be looking at $50,000 to $75,000 in a settlement. If this goes to trial, and a jury hears about an HOA president stealing someone's property in retaliation for voting against her proposal, you could see significantly more. My head spun. I had just wanted my generator back. What would you need from me? All the documentation you have already compiled, which sounds like it is thorough. A detailed timeline of your interactions with Karen and the HOA. Any and all correspondence, violation notices, meeting minutes, everything. Then we file a civil suit against both Karen individually and the HOA as an organization. Let me think about it for a couple of days. Take your time, but do not wait too long. Striking while this is fresh and while there is criminal prosecution ongoing will work in our favor. The emergency HOA meeting that night was unlike anything I had ever witnessed in 4 years of living in Meadowbrook Heights. The community center was packed with over 100 homeowners, far more than usually attended these meetings. The tension in the room was palpable. The vice president, a mild-mannered man named Donald who usually let Karen run the show, stood at the front looking distinctly uncomfortable. Karen was notably absent. "Thank you all for coming," Donald began, his voice shaky. "I know there has been a lot of talk about recent events. I want to assure everyone that the HOA board is taking this situation very seriously." "Where is Karen?" someone shouted from the back. "Karen Fieldstone has been temporarily suspended from her duties as president pending the resolution of the current legal situation." "Temporarily." Marcus stood up, his voice booming. "The woman committed a felony. She stole from one of our neighbors and sold his property. She needs to be permanently removed from the board." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, but there were also a few dissenting voices. A woman named Cheryl, who had been friends with Karen for years, stood up. "We do not know the whole story. Karen has served this community faithfully for 6 years. She deserves the benefit of the doubt until this is all sorted out." I could not stay quiet. I stood up. "I am Vincent Holbrook. Karen stole my $8,000 generator from my property, which I had installed with full HOA approval. She pawned it for $2,000. I have video evidence. The police have arrested her. There is no other side to this story. She committed a crime." The room erupted in cross-talk. Donald tried to restore order by banging a gavel on the podium. "Please, everyone. I understand emotions are running high. The board will be meeting to discuss Karen's status. We will follow our bylaws and procedures." "The bylaws state that any board member convicted of a crime must be immediately removed," Janet called out. She had apparently done her homework. "We do not need to wait. We can vote right now to remove her from the board." "She has not been convicted yet," Cheryl protested. "She has been arrested and charged with a felony," Robert countered. "That is enough for a suspension at minimum. But honestly, we all know she is guilty. Vincent has video evidence." Donald looked overwhelmed. "I will call for a vote. All in favor of permanently removing Karen Fieldstone from the HOA board, raise your hand." I looked around the room. At least 3/4 of the hands went up, including Marcus, Janet, Robert, and dozens of others I recognized from the neighborhood. The few who did not raise their hands mostly looked uncertain rather than oppositional. "The motion passes," Donald announced. "Karen Fieldstone is hereby removed from the HOA board effective immediately. We will need to hold an election for a new president within 30 days per our bylaws." After the meeting, dozens of people came up to me to express their support. Many shared their own stories of Karen's harassment and overreach over the years. A man named Stephen told me about how Karen had fined him $500 for having a vegetable garden in his backyard that she claimed was visible from the street, even though his backyard was completely fenced. A woman named Michelle described getting cited for having a car in her driveway with an expired registration, which she was in the process of renewing. The stories went on and on. Karen had created enemies throughout the entire community. Over the next 3 weeks, I focused on compiling everything Patricia needed for the civil case. Going through years of HOA correspondence was tedious and infuriating. I found violation notices for things like my garage door being open for more than 30 minutes during the day, my front lawn grass being 1 inch taller than regulations allowed, and a package sitting on my porch for more than 24 hours. Every single one came with a fine, ranging from $25 to $200. Patricia was delighted with the paper trail. This establishes a clear pattern of harassment. Combined with the generator theft, we can argue that Karen targeted you specifically, which strengthens our case. The preliminary hearing arrived. I sat in the courtroom gallery with Marcus, who had insisted on coming to support me. Karen sat at the defense table with her attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit named Richard Brennan. She refused to look in my direction. The prosecutor, an assistant county attorney named Lisa Hoffman, presented the case efficiently. She walked through the video evidence, the GPS tracking, the pawn shop records, and my documentation proving ownership. It took less than 30 minutes. Richard Brennan tried to argue that Karen believed she had authority to remove the generator due to HOA rules, but Judge Patricia Williams was not having it. Mr. Brennan, even if your client believed the generator violated HOA regulations, which the documentation clearly shows it did not, the remedy is through fines and legal proceedings, not self-help removal of property. And certainly not selling that property to a pawn shop and pocketing the money. The evidence presented today is more than sufficient to proceed to trial. Judge Williams set a trial date for 2 months out and maintained Karen's bail conditions. As we filed out of the courtroom, Karen and her attorney brushed past us. I heard Karen hiss to her attorney, "I want to sue him for defamation and harassment." Richard Brennan looked tired. "Karen, you are facing felony charges." Let us focus on that before we talk about countersuits that have no basis. A week after the preliminary hearing, Patricia called me with news. Karen's attorney reached out. They want to settle the civil case. Already, they know they are going to lose. The criminal case is a disaster for her, and the civil case is even worse. They offered $20,000. What do you think? I think we can get more. Let me counter with $85,000. We will probably settle somewhere in the middle. The negotiation took another week. We finally agreed on $65,000, split between Karen personally and the HOA's insurance company. The HOA portion came with an agreement that they would rewrite several of their more oppressive rules and implement better oversight on board member conduct. Patricia had pushed hard for the systemic changes, and I appreciated that the resolution would help other homeowners, not just me. The criminal case took longer. Karen's attorney tried multiple motions to get the charges reduced or dismissed. Judge Williams denied them all. Eventually, facing overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a trial she would certainly lose, Karen accepted a plea deal. I attended the sentencing hearing. Karen stood before Judge Williams, looking smaller somehow than she had when she ruled over the HOA with an iron fist. Her attorney spoke first, painting a picture of a dedicated community volunteer who had made a terrible mistake due to stress and poor judgment. Then Lisa Hoffman, the prosecutor, stood up. "Your Honor, this was not a mistake or a momentary lapse in judgment. Miss Fieldstone engaged in premeditated theft. She planned this. She brought tools and a dolly to remove the generator. She transported it to a pawn shop. She provided identification and accepted $2,000 for property she knew belonged to someone else. She did this in retaliation against Mr. Holbrook for opposing her at an HOA meeting. This was not poor judgment. This was vindictive criminal conduct by someone who believed her position made her above the law." Judge Williams nodded. "I have reviewed all the materials in this case. Miss Fieldstone, do you have anything to say before I impose sentence?" Karen stood, her voice barely above a whisper. I apologized to Mr. Holbrook and to the community. I let my emotions get the better of me. I have already lost my position in the HOA and my reputation. I just want to move forward. Judge Williams did not look sympathetic. Miss Fieldstone, you held a position of trust in your community. You were elected by your neighbors to lead your HOA and enforce reasonable rules fairly. Instead, you used that position to harass, intimidate, and ultimately steal from someone who disagreed with you. That is an egregious abuse of authority. She paused, looking down at her paperwork. On the charge of felony theft, I sentence you to 2 years in prison, suspended with 3 years of supervised probation. You will serve 90 days in county jail with credit for time served. On the charge of trafficking in stolen property, I sentence you to 18 months in prison, suspended, concurrent with the first charge. You will pay restitution to Mr. Holbrook in the amount of $8,000 for the generator, plus $2,000 to Desert Gold Exchange for their loss. You will complete 100 hours of community service and attend anger management counseling. If you violate the terms of your probation, you will serve the full prison sentence. You understand? Yes, Your Honor. As the bailiff led Karen away to begin her 90-day jail sentence, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, certainly, vindication, but also something like pity. She had thrown away her reputation, her freedom, and tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees and settlements because she could not handle someone disagreeing with her at a meeting. After the sentencing, Lisa Hoffman found me in the hallway. Mr. Holbrook, I want you to know that your documentation and preparation made this case incredibly easy to prosecute. A lot of theft victims do not have nearly the level of evidence you provided. I work in tech. I believe in having backups and documentation for everything. She smiled. Well, it paid off. I hope you get your generator back soon. I did get it back 2 days later. Detective Martinez called me to come pick it up from the evidence room. When I loaded it into my truck, I checked it over carefully. It was undamaged, and the GPS tracker was still securely hidden inside. The HOA held new elections a week after Karen's sentencing. Marcus was elected president in a landslide. His first act was to review and eliminate what he called the Karen rules, the dozens of petty regulations she had implemented over her 6-year reign. The rule about garage doors being closed during the day was gone. The rule about package delivery timeframes was gone. The excessive restrictions on landscaping choices were relaxed. The neighborhood felt lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. Marcus invited me to his house for a beer to celebrate his election. We sat on his back patio as the Arizona sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. You know what the funny thing is? Marcus said, taking a sip of his beer. If Karen had just left your generator alone, she probably would still be running the HOA. She had enough loyalists who either agreed with her or were too intimidated to oppose her. But she got so arrogant that she thought she could literally steal someone's property and get away with it. Pride goes before a fall, I said, biblical and accurate. Marcus raised his beer bottle. Here is to having your generator back and having a neighborhood that is not run by a petty tyrant. We clinked bottles. I thought about everything that had happened over the past 2.5 months. The shock of watching the security footage that morning felt like it had happened years ago, instead of weeks. The GPS tracker I had installed on a whim, thinking I was just being cautious about theft, had become the key piece of evidence that brought down someone who had terrorized the neighborhood for years. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Civil settlement funds cleared. Wire transfer will hit your account tomorrow. Congratulations on the criminal case outcome. Let me know if you ever need anything else." I texted back my thanks. The $65,000 would more than cover the generator cost, my legal fees, and compensate me for my time and stress. More importantly, the systemic changes to the HOA rules would benefit everyone in Meadowbrook Heights for years to come. Janet called me the next day. "Vincent, I just heard that Karen's house is going up for sale." "Really? Really?" I guess between the criminal case, the civil settlement, and her reputation being destroyed, she and her husband have decided to move. Probably for the best. I cannot imagine her living here after everything that happened. I felt a twinge of something. Not quite sympathy, but recognition that her life had fundamentally changed because of her choices. She would have a felony record. She had spent 90 days in jail. She had paid out tens of thousands of dollars. She had lost her position and her standing in the community. All because she could not handle being told no at an HOA meeting and decided to retaliate by stealing an $8,000 generator. The for sale sign went up on Karen's house 3 days later. A realtor's smiling face beamed from the sign, promising top-dollar sales and quick closings. I wondered if they knew about the circumstances behind the sale, or if Karen and her husband had spun some story about relocating for work or family reasons. Life in Meadowbrook Heights gradually returned to normal, though it was a new normal. Marcus ran the HOA with a light touch, focusing on actual community needs like maintaining common areas and organizing neighborhood events, rather than on enforcement and violations. The monthly HOA meetings became pleasant affairs where people actually wanted to attend, rather than dreaded obligations. I installed a second security camera covering the generator pad, though I doubted I would need it now. The GPS tracker stayed exactly where it was. After everything that had happened, I believed firmly in the value of being prepared and having solid documentation. About 6 months after Karen's sentencing, I ran into Richard Brennan, her former attorney, at a coffee shop in Scottsdale. He recognized me and came over to my table. "Mr. Holbrook, I hope you do not mind me saying hello." "Not at all," I said, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. He sat down with his coffee. "I wanted to apologize for some of the things that were said during the legal proceedings. I was representing my client zealously, as I am required to do, but personally, I thought what Karen did was indefensible. I appreciate that. I have been practicing law for 20 years, and I have represented a lot of people who made bad choices. But the thing that struck me about Karen's case was how avoidable it all was. She had options. She could have continued to fine you within the HOA framework, even if those fines were questionable. She could have tried to gather support for another vote on the generator rule. She could have done a dozen different things that would have been annoying but legal. Instead, she chose the one course of action that was unambiguously criminal. I never understood it. I think she was so used to getting her way that she could not conceive of consequences, I said. She had been running that HOA like her personal kingdom for years. When someone finally stood up to her effectively, she snapped. Richard nodded slowly. "You are probably right. Well, I hope things are better in your neighborhood now. Much better. We have a new president who actually listens to people. Good. That is good." He stood up. "Take care, Mr. Holbrook." I watched him leave, thinking about that conversation. Karen had been represented by a competent attorney who clearly knew the case was a loser from the start. She must have been advised to settle, to apologize, to make it right. But she had fought it every step of the way until the evidence was so overwhelming that she had no choice but to take a plea. My sister called me from Denver that evening. "Hey, I saw your Facebook post about the HOA thing finally being resolved. I still cannot believe all of that actually happened." It was pretty surreal to live through, I admitted. Mom wants to know if you are okay. She is worried that you are traumatized or something. I laughed. Tell Mom I am fine. Honestly, once the legal stuff got rolling, it was mostly just paperwork and waiting. The whole thing was more tedious than traumatizing. You should write a book about it. How I took down my HOA president with a GPS tracker and security cameras. I do not think anyone would believe it if I wrote it as fiction. Probably not. Hey, are you still coming for Christmas? Planning on it. I will fly out the week before and stay through New Year's like usual. After we hung up, I thought about her joking suggestion to write a book. Maybe not a book, but I had been documenting everything in detailed notes throughout the process. Perhaps it would be useful as a case study or a cautionary tale about HOA overreach. Marcus hosted a neighborhood barbecue the following weekend to celebrate summer and the HOA's new direction. Over 50 people showed up, far more than had ever attended the stiff, formal events Karen used to organize. Kids ran through sprinklers in the common area. People actually talked to each other and seemed to enjoy themselves. Stephen, the guy who had been fined for his vegetable garden, pulled me aside. Vincent, I wanted to thank you. If you had not stood up to Karen and documented everything the way you did, she would probably still be making all our lives miserable. You did something a lot of us wanted to do but did not have the guts for. I just wanted my generator back, I said honestly. Everything else kind of snowballed from there. Well, still, thank you. Similar conversations happened throughout the afternoon. I realized that while I had been focused on my own situation, my willingness to fight back against Karen and pursue criminal charges had resonated with dozens of other homeowners who had felt powerless against her for years. It was humbling and a little overwhelming. As the sun began to set and people started drifting home, Marcus and I stayed behind to help clean up. You know what I think the real lesson is here, Marcus said as we bagged trash. What is that? Documentation matters. If you had not had those cameras, if you had not had the GPS tracker, if you had not kept every piece of paper the HOA ever sent you, Karen probably would have gotten away with it. She would have claimed the generator was abandoned or that you gave her permission or some other lie, and it would have been your word against hers. But you had proof of everything. That is true. I never thought I would be glad I am obsessive about keeping records, but it paid off. It is a good reminder for all of us. HOAs have a lot of power, and sometimes that power gets abused. The only real defense is to document everything and know your rights. I thought about that as I drove home that evening. The whole experience had taught me that preparation and documentation were not just good habits for work, but for life in general. The GPS tracker had cost me $40. The security cameras had been a few hundred. That relatively small investment had saved me thousands of dollars and prevented Karen from getting away with theft. The next HOA newsletter, the first one under Marcus's leadership, included a section on homeowner rights and resources. It listed the specific Arizona statutes that governed HOAs, contact information for the state agency that oversees them, and recommendations for documenting any interactions with the board. Marcus had asked me to help write that section, and I had poured my recent experience into making it as useful as possible. Karen's house sold after about 2 months on the market. A young family with 3 kids moved in, and they seemed friendly and normal. They came to me during their first week to introduce themselves, and the husband mentioned that the realtor had told them the previous owners had relocated for work. I did not correct the story. The new neighbors did not need to know the details, and I was content to let that chapter close. Detective Martinez sent me an email a few weeks after the house sold. Mr. Holbrook, I wanted to let you know that Karen Fieldstone completed her 90-day jail sentence and has been released on probation. She has paid the full restitution amount to both you and the pawn shop. Her probation officer will be monitoring her closely for the next 3 years. I doubt she will cause you any further trouble, but let me know if she contacts you or comes near your property. I appreciated the update. Knowing that Karen was out but on a tight leash gave me peace of mind. The restitution check for $8,000 arrived in the mail 2 days later, sent from her attorney's office. I deposited it immediately. Life continued to improve in Meadowbrook Heights. Marcus organized a neighborhood watch program that was actually about safety rather than spying on neighbors for violations. The HOA budget was opened up for full transparency, and homeowners discovered that Karen had been approving expenditures to companies owned by her friends without competitive bidding. Marcus put an end to those arrangements and saved the HOA thousands of dollars annually. I got a call from a local news station about 6 months after the sentencing. A reporter named Amanda Chen wanted to do a story about HOA abuse and had heard about my case. Mr. Holbrook, we are working on an investigative piece about HOA overreach in the Phoenix area. Your case is one of the most dramatic we have come across. Would you be willing to be interviewed? I thought about it for a moment. Part of me just wanted to move on and forget the whole thing. But another part of me remembered all those conversations at the neighborhood barbecue, all those people who had suffered under Karen's rule and felt powerless to stop it. Yes, I will do the interview. The segment aired 2 weeks later during the evening news. Amanda had done her homework, interviewing not just me but several other Meadowbrook Heights residents, legal experts on HOA law, and even Patricia Gomez, my attorney. The piece painted a broader picture of how HOAs could become instruments of harassment when leadership went unchecked. The response was immediate and overwhelming. I received dozens of emails and messages from people around the Phoenix area, and even across the country who had similar experiences with their HOAs. Many asked for advice on how to fight back. I spent hours responding, sharing the lessons I had learned about documentation, knowing your rights, and not being afraid to involve law enforcement when actual crimes occur. Patricia called me after the segment aired. Vincent, my phone has been ringing off the hook with people who saw the news story and want help with their HOA situations. I have had to bring in an associate just to handle the volume. You have started something. I did not mean to start anything. I just wanted to get my generator back. She laughed. Sometimes that is how movements begin. Someone just wants their generator back, and it exposes a much bigger problem. A state representative named Angela Rodriguez reached out to me a month after the news segment. She was working on legislation to reform HOA regulations in Arizona and wanted my input based on my experience. Mr. Holbrook, your case highlighted several gaps in our current HOA oversight system, she explained during our phone call. I am proposing a bill that would create stricter accountability for HOA board members, make it easier for homeowners to challenge improper fines, and establish real penalties for HOAs that exceed their authority. Would you be willing to testify before the legislature about your experience? I had never imagined myself testifying before the state legislature, but this felt important. Yes, I would be willing to do that. The legislative hearing was scheduled for 2 months later. In the meantime, I worked with Representative Rodriguez's staff to prepare my testimony. They wanted me to focus on the specific abuses I had experienced, the challenges I faced in getting justice, and what systemic changes would have prevented the situation from escalating the way it did. The day of the hearing, I put on my best suit and drove to the state capitol building in Phoenix. The committee room was smaller than I expected, but packed with people. I recognized several faces from the news segment and the online HOA reform community that had sprung up after my story went public. When it was my turn to testify, I approached the microphone feeling nervous but determined. I told my story as clearly and concisely as I could, emphasizing the key points. I had followed all the rules, obtained all the proper approvals, and done everything right. And yet, an HOA board president still felt empowered to steal my property in retaliation for disagreeing with her. The only reason I got justice was because I happened to have installed a GPS tracker and security cameras, I concluded. Most homeowners are not that prepared or that lucky. We need laws that protect homeowners from HOA overreach before they become victims, not just remedies after the fact. The committee members asked thoughtful questions. One representative asked how I thought HOA board members should be held accountable. I suggested requiring board member training, implementing term limits to prevent entrenched power structures, and creating an independent state office where homeowners could file complaints without fear of retaliation. The hearing lasted 3 hours. By the end, I was exhausted but hopeful. Representative Rodriguez seemed confident that the bill would advance, though she warned me that the legislative process was slow, and there would be opposition from some HOA management companies that benefited from the current system. 6 months later, the HOA Reform Act passed the Arizona legislature and was signed into law by the governor. It was not everything we had hoped for, but it was a significant step forward. The new law required HOA board members to complete annual training on their legal obligations, capped the fines HOAs could impose without a court judgment, and created a state ombudsman office to investigate homeowner complaints. Representative Rodriguez invited me to the bill's signing ceremony. Standing in the governor's office, watching him sign the legislation into law, I thought about the chain of events that had led to this moment. It had started with me being angry about a stolen generator. It had grown into a criminal case, then a civil lawsuit, then a news story, and now actual legislative reform that would protect thousands of homeowners across Arizona. Marcus hosted another neighborhood barbecue to celebrate the new law. This time, homeowners from other neighborhoods showed up too, people who had followed the story and wanted to meet the guy who had taken on his HOA and sparked a reform movement. A woman named Teresa from a neighborhood in Tempe came up to me with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Holbrook, I just want to thank you. My HOA has been fining me for having a garden gnome in my front yard. A garden gnome. They said it violated aesthetic standards. I was about to give up and just remove it, but your story inspired me to fight back." I filed a complaint with the new ombudsman office last week. Stories like that made everything worthwhile. I had not set out to be an advocate or an activist. I had just wanted my generator back and refused to let someone get away with stealing from me. But sometimes standing up for yourself opens doors for other people to stand up too. A year after the theft, I was invited to speak at a national HOA reform conference in Las Vegas. The organizers wanted me to share my story and talk about the lessons learned. I accepted, though public speaking was far outside my comfort zone. The conference was eye-opening. I met people from across the country who had experienced HOA nightmares that made my situation look tame by comparison. There were stories of HOAs foreclosing on homes over small, unpaid fines, HOAs banning American flags and military service decorations, HOAs imposing rules that seemed designed solely to harass specific homeowners. The scope of the problem was far bigger than I had realized. My presentation focused on practical advice. Document everything. Know your state and local laws. Do not be afraid to involve law enforcement when crimes occur. And remember that HOA board members are not above the law, no matter how much they act like they are. I showed photos of my generator, the GPS tracking app, and even some of the more ridiculous violation notices Karen had sent me over the years. The response was overwhelming. People lined up afterward to ask questions, share their stories, and thank me for speaking out. Several attorneys approached me about partnering on HOA reform litigation in other states. I exchanged contact information with dozens of people who were fighting similar battles in their own communities. Flying home from Las Vegas, I reflected on how much my life had changed in just over a year. I was still the same person, still a software consultant working from home in Phoenix. But I had also become something of an accidental advocate, someone people reached out to when they faced HOA abuse. The generator itself sat on its concrete pad behind my house, still faithfully providing backup power during the occasional outages. Every time I looked at it, I remembered that morning when I watched Karen wheel it away on camera. I remembered the anger and disbelief, the decision to install the GPS tracker that proved so crucial, and the entire cascade of events that followed. Marcus stopped by one evening with a bottle of bourbon to celebrate the one-year anniversary of what he called the generator incident. "Can you believe it has been a year?" he said as we sat on my back patio. "Sometimes it feels like it just happened. Other times it feels like a lifetime ago. You changed this neighborhood, Vincent. Hell, you changed HOA law in the entire state. That is not nothing." "I still just wanted my generator back," I said, but I was smiling. "Yeah, but you did not stop there. You could have gotten the generator back and let it go. But you pursued justice, you shared your story, you pushed for systemic change. That took guts." We toasted to that, to standing up for yourself and for others, to documentation and preparation, and to the simple principle that no one, not even an HOA president, is above the law. Karen had served her jail time and was living somewhere in Tucson, according to the neighborhood gossip network. Her ex-husband, who had divorced her during the legal proceedings, still had family in the Phoenix area. I bore her no ill will at this point. She had paid for her crimes literally and figuratively. I hoped she had learned something from the experience, though I would never know. The new family living in her old house were wonderful neighbors. They came to HOA meetings, volunteered for neighborhood events, and their kids played with other kids on the street. It was as if the dark cloud that had hung over that house for so many years had finally lifted. I continued to work with Representative Rodriguez on further HOA reform legislation. We were pushing for even stronger protections, including a homeowner bill of rights that would be posted in all HOA common areas and sent to every resident annually. The fight was not over, but we had momentum. Late one evening, about 14 months after the theft, I received an unexpected email. The return address was from a generic free email service and the subject line read, "I'm sorry." I opened it cautiously, half expecting spam or a scam. Instead, I found a message from Karen. "Mr. Holbrook, I know I have no right to contact you, and if you want to forward this to my probation officer, I would understand. I wanted to tell you that I am sorry for what I did. Not just the theft, but for years of treating you and other homeowners badly. I thought I was serving the community by enforcing standards, but I was really just on a power trip. Losing everything, going to jail, having time to think about my choices, it has given me perspective I should have had years ago. You had every right to prosecute me, and I deserved what I got. I hope you and your neighbors are doing well. I hope the HOA is better without me running it. That is all I wanted to say. Karen." I read the email 3 times. It sounded genuine, and there was a weariness to the tone that suggested real reflection. I thought about responding, but I decided against it. Some things were better left in the past. I hoped her apology was sincere and that she had genuinely learned and grown from the experience. But my involvement in her life was over. Instead, I forwarded the email to Detective Martinez with a note that Karen had contacted me, as he had asked me to do. He responded that he would inform her probation officer, but that the email did not constitute a violation since it was not threatening, and I had not been given a no-contact order. That was fine. I deleted the email and moved on. Life in Meadowbrook Heights continued to improve. Under Marcus's leadership, the HOA became what it was supposed to be, an organization that maintained common areas, organized community events, and enforced reasonable rules reasonably. Violation notices became rare. Fines were reserved for actual problems like abandoned vehicles or serious property damage, not for trash cans left out a few minutes too long or grass being an inch too tall. Property values in the neighborhood increased as word spread that we had cleaned house and reformed our HOA. Real estate agents started listing reformed HOA as a selling point in their listings for Meadowbrook Heights homes. It was a strange point of pride, but I understood it. An HOA that functions properly adds value to a community. An HOA run by someone like Karen destroys value and makes people miserable. I continued to do interviews and speaking engagements about HOA reform. Some were local, others took me around the country. I spoke to homeowner groups, testified before state legislatures, and even appeared on a national morning show to discuss HOA abuse. Each time, I told the same basic story. Document everything, know your rights, and do not be afraid to stand up to abuse of power. The generator itself became almost a symbol. During interviews, reporters always wanted to take pictures of it. The $8,000 generator that brought down an HOA president, one headline read. It was a bit dramatic, but not inaccurate. 2 years after the theft, I received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the National HOA Reform Coalition for my advocacy work. The award ceremony was in Washington, D.C., and homeowners from across the country attended. Standing at the podium, accepting the award, I thought about that morning when I watched Karen steal my generator on camera. I never could have imagined that moment would lead to this. I am not a lawyer. I am not a professional advocate, and I never set out to reform HOAs, I said in my acceptance speech. I am just a guy who had something stolen from him and decided to do something about it, but I learned that individual action can spark collective change. I learned that one person standing up can inspire others to stand up too. And I learned that systems can change when people demand better. Thank you for this honor, but the real honor is seeing homeowners across the country empowered to fight back against abuse and seeing laws change to protect people's rights. The standing ovation was overwhelming. After the ceremony, dozens of people wanted to talk, to share their stories, to ask advice. I stayed for hours, talking to everyone who wanted to connect. These were my people now, fellow homeowners who had been pushed around by their HOAs and decided to push back. Flying home to Phoenix that night, I looked out the airplane window at the lights of cities passing below. Somewhere down there were thousands of HOAs, some good and some bad, some serving their communities well and others abusing their power. The work of reform would continue. Laws would keep improving. Homeowners would keep fighting back. And it all traced back, at least in part, to one decision I made to install a GPS tracker in my generator and to pursue justice when it was stolen. My generator still sits on that concrete pad behind my house in Meadowbrook Heights, faithfully providing backup power when needed. The GPS tracker is still hidden inside, though I doubt I will ever need it again. Sometimes I walk past it and remember everything it represents. Standing up for yourself, the importance of documentation, the power of persistence, and the truth that no one is above the law. Not even, and perhaps especially not, the president of a homeowners association.